Welcome to Good Journeys with Second Mountain, the podcast that shines a spotlight on inspiring people and their inspired stories. Coming up on this episode,
you got to figure out how you define success, right? Like find something that makes you happy. Maybe you got fired from your job and maybe it was a blessing in disguise where you can find something else that you're passionate about and find a way to make money doing that. Because I promise you're going to work harder at something you're passionate about. You're going to work harder doing something for you or doing something you love than you would at like a 9 to 5 or something that you're just clocking in and clocking out. So I think that would be my piece of advice is to, we only have one life, right? Why spend it doing something you don't love? I mean, it sounds like so ridiculous, but for so many people, they don't do what they love. They don't do what they're passionate about. I don't know why I'm wired the way I am, where like I just knew I had this goal, this passion, this dream that I had to go for it. I almost feel sorry for the people who are afraid to bet on themselves. It's never too late, right? To change your own story. It's never too late. I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, 50. Like tomorrow you can start doing what you want to do.
Welcome to the purpose-driven podcast, Good Journeys with Second Mountain. I'm your host and the founder of Second Mountain Comms, Ben Veal, and joining me today on the show is my special guest, Matt Cardona. Matt is a highly successful professional wrestler, globally recognised for his work in World Wrestling Entertainment, the NWA, Impact Wrestling, and for promotions across the United States and beyond. Debuting in the sport almost 20 years ago now alongside his longtime friend Brian Myers, Cardona found fame as Zack Ryder in WWE, where he would go on to hold the United States, Intercontinental and Raw Tag Team Championships. In April 2020, early on into the COVID pandemic, Matt was released by WWE and wished all the best in his future endeavours. And that's where our story begins today. While Matt and I both do very different things for a living, there's actually many similarities between his story and my own, as we'll come on to in our conversation today. We were both let go by our employers within a 24-hour period of one another at the start of the pandemic. Yet only 2 years later, both of us received awards for our independent success within our respective fields. Matt was named Independent Wrestler of the Year in 2022 by leading industry title Pro Wrestling Illustrated, while here in the UK, I received the award for Independent PR Practitioner of the Year from the CIPR, the leading chartered body for public relations professionals. Proof that self-belief and knowing your own value can go a very long way indeed. Over the course of the past 3 years, Matt has gone on to carve an incredible path for himself as an independent wrestler, competing all over the world, winning multiple championships, including the NWA World Heavyweight title, and elevating his personal brand to new heights. Matt is also the co-host of the Major Wrestling Figure podcast, star of pro wrestling rock musical The Last Match, husband to fellow wrestling star Chelsea Green, and is always ready to take the next step in his journey. But before we dive into that, please subscribe and give the Good Journeys pod a big thumbs up or 5-star rating, however you're tuning in today. Join in and let us know what you think using the hashtag Good Journeys pod, as your support helps us to keep sharing inspired stories from inspiring people. Right, enough of the hype. Let's jump into the show. Matt, welcome to the Good Journeys with Second Mountain podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That's a long intro. You've done a lot.
It's a very long intro. Yeah, I appreciate that too.
Well, thank you for joining me on the show today. I mean, this podcast is all about inspiring journeys and we've got a lot of ground to cover. And, you and I are here today. I reached out to you to talk about resilience and specifically making lemonade when life gives you lemons. And in April 2020, life gave both you and I a big bag full of lemons when we both lost our jobs within 24 hours of each other. So I kind of want to come on to that first, that you were released by WWE on April 15th, 2020. Yes. I was let go by my employer on April 16th. And obviously this happened just weeks after COVID took over the world and completely changed the industries that we both work in. So kind of going back to that time, what was it like to receive back news and what was your immediate reaction?
I did not see it coming leading up to that, but that morning, at the time worked for WWE, all of the talent got a video message from Vince McMahon basically saying that there would be some cuts. And once we got that message, I knew, okay, I'm probably going to be one of the guys on that list. I didn't know for sure. A year prior, WWE had offered, I'd say pretty much everybody, a new 5-year contract with significantly more money. But I did not sign that contract because I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay or go. I mean, my career is well documented, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. And at that time, I just wasn't sure, do I want to stick around here? Or do I want to stay here for another 5 years? I wasn't sure. And for an entire year, I'd be back and forth negotiating. The anxiety was weighing on me. Do I stay? Do I go? What do I do? Ultimately, the decision was made for me. If I wasn't released in April, my contract would have been up in August. So that morning when, Brian Myers gets the call, guys like Heath, Gallows, Anderson, I still had not gotten the call yet. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, are they just going to let me rot until August? At that point, I was like, please call me and fire me, please. So at least I can get my life started.
Yeah.
So the call eventually came and I needed it. The weight was lifted off my shoulder. That anxiety, do I stay, do I go, was ultimately taken away instantly because the decision was made for me. There was no more, what should I do? Do I want to stay here? Do I want to try something else? Like, it was made for me. And then my back was against the wall and it was sink or swim at that point. I needed it and I was ready for it. And I knew I was going to capitalize on it. Except the problem was, like you said, we were living in this global pandemic. We didn't know what this world was. There was nowhere to instantly go wrestle. There was no independent wrestling scene. The whole world was shut down. What was I going to do for money? Luckily, I had the major Wrestling for a podcast, like you had mentioned earlier, to keep me afloat, bills wise. But I wasn't quite sure what my next step would be in the wrestling world.
I mean, you're someone who's obviously always kind of carved out this real niche in the online world, and you had all these different kind of creative projects going on at the same time. So I guess you're in slightly a different position from some of your other kind of colleagues in WWE when you were let go.
Even my partner, Brian Myers, partner in the podcast, right? I mean, he had signed that 5-year contract a year prior. So he's getting this big fat paycheck. His wife quits her job. They get pregnant with their second kid, and then boom, he gets the call. So he's in a totally different position than me. He's got this family, a new child on the way. For me, I don't have a family. I mean, obviously I have a family, but I don't have kids to support. At the time it was just my fiance and some cats. So I was in a way safer position where I wasn't worrying about having to feed other people. So I was fortunate in that regard. So, and there are plenty of other people, there are people who were released that day who haven't really done much of anything in the wrestling business since then. But this might sound harsh, but I have no sympathy for them because we all had the opportunity to make names for ourselves. And we all had the opportunity to go out there and bet on ourselves. Some people did, some people didn't.
Yeah, no, I've heard you say in another interview that there's only 3 things in the wrestling business that you can control, being your gear, your physique, and your attitude. So talk to me about how you started to take back control in 2020. How did you approach this reinvention of Matt Cardona?
Well, that was the interesting part, right? Because as crazy as this may sound, I wasn't necessarily comfortable with the name Matt Cardona. For so long, I was Zack Ryder, right? Luckily, I had started that podcast while in WWE, and I had learned through starting a YouTube show in 2011 that even if WWE doesn't come up with it, if you do it while you're under contract using their IP, intellectual property, it instantly becomes theirs. So I went through that with my YouTube show, basically getting taken away from me. So I knew when we started this podcast, even though we were working in WWE, we had to make sure it wasn't Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins Wrestling Figure Podcast. It had to be Matt Cardona and Brian Myers. And I'm so glad I used my real name for the podcast, because once I was released, I was like, well, I don't have to think of some weird gimmick name. I could just be me, Matt Cardona. So the name was easy. But like I said, we were living this pandemic. There were no shows going on. What was I going to do? So that was really scary. I knew I needed a change. I knew I needed a fresh coat of paint. But what was it going to be? I didn't have the game plan, instantly. I definitely did not. It was a work in progress for sure.
I mean, I remember getting the news. I had a 1-year-old baby at the time and just being, it caught me, same as you, completely by surprise. Wasn't expecting it. I was quite new into a role. And I was terrified, again, thinking about how you feed your family and what you're going to do. And the world had just shut down to such a crazy degree at that time.
Right.
I mean, for you as a performer who's used to wrestling in front of tens of thousands of fans, it must have been so weird to think that you'd be wrestling in front of empty arenas or barely any fans.
Well, even for the first 90 days, there was a no compete clause, so I couldn't wrestle anywhere. And this is going to sound horrible too, but those 90 days were like maybe some of the best times of my life, because for so long I was on this schedule, this nonstop, no off-season schedule for basically I was signed to WWE in 2006, got released in 2020. So 14 years of go, 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 go. And now, not only do I not have to go to work, there's nothing else to do. So like those 3 months, those 90 days, I actually loved it. It was like a vacation. The whole world was shut down, but I live in Florida. Beautiful weather. I was in the pool every day. I didn't mind it. So fortunately, I was in a different position than a lot of people because it was a horrible, horrible time for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I was the same. I mean, I used that time. We had a beautiful spell of weather here in the UK between March and July. Stunning. I used the time to pause, to reflect. You know, I had the kids at home and homeschool and all that kind of fun and games, which wasn't easy. But I did use the time to kind of reassess and build my Second Mountain business through that time. So the same as you, I had essentially 90 days to think, what do I want to do next? And when I come out the other side of this, what's my life going to be like? I wanted to just kind of touch on social media for you. So, you know, you were a social media influencer really way before that was a thing in wrestling. It feels crazy that there was a time when every wrestler under the sun wasn't on social media. You know, what was that journey like to creating your first YouTube series all those years ago? And how instrumental was that to the early years of your career and standing out in WWE?
Well, I think without that YouTube show that I started in 2011, Z True Long Island Story, without that show, I wouldn't even be here talking to you today. You know what I'm saying? Because that set me up for my whole career, because it built this connection with the audience. And that's the most important thing in wrestling, is to have a connection with the audience. And I started that YouTube show because I wasn't happy with my position in the company. But what are you going to do, right? You can't, you can only do what you can control. I don't write the show. I can't change what I'm doing on the show. But I thought, well, maybe if I can give the fans a different, you know, peek into my life, a peek into my character. So I started this YouTube show where I kind of blended, you know, my real life with my wrestling character, showed sides of me that you wouldn't understand from just watching me on TV for a couple of minutes. You know, that, you know, I was a big wrestling fan. I collected wrestling figures. I love Star Wars. I love, you know, boy bands, or I was, you know, anything. And I was showing that side of me on this YouTube show and on social media, and the fans felt like I was letting them in, and I was, and they started to root for me. They decided, like, this is one of our guys. He's just like us. He's a diehard fan just like us, except he's actually wrestling. Let's cheer him on. Let's try to get him noticed by WWE. And thanks to, you know, them bringing signs, chanting my name, buying my merchandise, WWE eventually took notice.
Yeah, and what was, you know, I know you had a bit of a push-pull relationship with WWE when it came to that kind of idea of being a homegrown talent versus being part of the, I guess, the marketing machine. At what point did they realize that this guy's over here doing his own thing? Hang on, that's not really part of the plan for him.
Yeah, you know, I started the show in February, and I don't think it's until maybe like late summer where they start using me in a consistent role on television. You know, and then luckily for me, the merchandise sales were through the roof. The fans were vocal, and the WWE just had to use me, if anything, to shut the fans up, you know, because they were chanting my name at shows I wasn't even at, which is pretty unheard of, especially at the time.
It's a curious phenomenon, isn't it? That actually, you know, the likes of you, Bryan Danielson, individuals like that really garner this kind of homegrown, very kind of organic love from the fans. And it's hard to ignore after a point.
No, I agree. And, you know, people make that connection a lot, but I have to argue that, is Bryan Danielson one of the best in the world? Absolutely. And did he deserve that whole yes movement? Absolutely. But he was on TV in a pretty good role, you know, maybe not world title status, but I wasn't even on goddamn television. Yeah. So I think what the fans did for me is even more impressive, because they took a guy from obscurity and brought him into, you know, teaming with John Cena, as opposed to like Daniel Bryan was already like US champion material. They just brought him up a step, you know, which that yes movement was nuts. It was awesome. That whole WrestleMania 30, phenomenal. Let's not like pretend that he wasn't being used at all, because he was.
So, well, look, WrestleMania moments, that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about. So I was here in the UK with my friends, staying up late watching WrestleMania 32. And seeing you get your moment when you climbed up that ladder in front of 100,000 fans and grabbed down the Intercontinental to WrestleMania 32, in terms of what that night was like for you when you got the news, and my favorite bit of all, what it was like when you were celebrating in the ring with your dad at the end.
Yeah, I mean, what a night. I mean, where do I begin? It was just a whole whirlwind. It was, you know, I wasn't even supposed to be in that match. Weeks prior, there was like an internal lineup, and I had heard that my name was on the list and off the list. I'm like, whatever. It's cool that I was considered. And then Neville, who's now Pac in AEW, he was supposed to be in that match. And on Monday Night Raw, he injured his ankle. And I think it was his ankle, his knee, something with his leg where he was going to be out. And the next day was SmackDown. And I went up to Road Dogg, who was a big higher up in the creative department. And I basically pitched and pleaded my case why no one else deserved to be in that match but me. I spilled my guts, and something I must have said, which he brought up later, was that I had never heard my music play at WrestleMania. And that wasn't this planned line that I was going to say. It just came from the heart. And he said that when I said that to him, he felt that, and he knew that people would relate to that, and that's the story to tell. And that's what got me into that match. And just the fact that I was in that match was a win for me. I had been in WrestleMania before in big tag team matches or doing run-ins or in those battle royals that everyone's in, but I never got to hear my music play. It was never a match where, of course, you're proud to be on WrestleMania, but it wasn't a match where like, hey, I'm really on WrestleMania. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So to hear my music play at WrestleMania was a win in itself, but the fact, the icing on the cake that I actually won the match was incredible. I found out, so WrestleMania was on Sunday. I found out on Tuesday there was a rehearsal where we went over the match, and I was told that was the plan. And I was like, oh man, it's Tuesday, WrestleMania Sunday. It's definitely going to change. There's too many days for someone to change this.
Yeah.
But it didn't change. And I think it was that upset, shocking moment that they were going for. And it was clearly the night of my career, the night of my life, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, when I looked down after winning that letter, I see my dad in the ring. At the time, it was pretty, dad genuinely hopped the barricade and slid in the ring. And it's funny because when I was released from WWE, obviously I knew what the phone call was about. I knew I was getting fired. There's a picture I have of me and my dad hugging from that WrestleMania. And I was just like looking at that picture and kind of smiling like, all right, it's going to be all right. Everything's okay. But yeah, what a great night. I mean, one of, if not the best nights of my career.
I have the joy of watching it back today under the guise of doing research for this interview because my job's really hard. And yeah, just that moment when you lift the title. I remember being there just thinking, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I was just waiting for like a last minute Miz push or something. I was like, there's no way. It's happened. Yeah.
I mean, incredible. I think if you were to poll the audience going into WrestleMania, I would have been the least likely to walk out as the winner. And I think that's what made the moment so great, is because even though maybe I was the least likely to win, the people still believed in me when they were given the opportunity to, even after all those years, because time had passed since the YouTube show. A couple of years had passed. So there was no reason for them to actually have faith in me, but they did. They never lost faith. And that's something I'm very, very grateful for.
And that's the fascinating thing about being a wrestling fan. I mean, obviously you and I both grew up with this sport and looked at it in a very different way when we were younger. But when people hear us talking about, no one believed he would win, it's not like kind of other sporting arenas where that's any reflection on your talent or ability. It's just all about the push. And it's all about your position as a talent within that company. It's a really kind of very unique sport in that regard, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's entertainment, right? It's a TV show. It's a TV show that doesn't have seasons. It just never ends. And we're all characters in that show. Not everyone's going to be the main character. Not everyone's going to be the heartthrob or, whatever, the top guy. It's just, that's what it is at the end of the day, and there's highs and lows, and you can't take it personally. You gotta, that's where the always ready came from. It's like, I will always be ready for whatever situation they put me in. And I will do whatever it takes to the best of my abilities to knock that opportunity out of the park.
And just going back to that night again, I know there's a famous photo that was doing the rounds and continues to do so online to this day of you backstage with the Intercontinental title with Scott Hall. He's holding your Intercontinental title. There's a photo of you when you were a kid holding his title as Razor Ramon. I mean, clearly you're still a huge wrestling fan at heart. Was that one of those moments when you felt a little bit like a little kid again?
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, as a kid, I was at WrestleMania 10. I saw Razor Ramon at WrestleMania win the Intercontinental title in a ladder match.
What a match.
A few months later, maybe a year later, I take a picture with Razor Ramon and I get to hold his Intercontinental title. And now all these years later, I win the Intercontinental title in a ladder match at WrestleMania. We take a photo, but it's him holding mine. Like no writer in Stamford, Connecticut wrote that story. That was real life. And I think when real life situations cross into the wrestling world, that's when they're the best.
Yeah, absolutely. So just sticking with WrestleMania for a minute, you were in attendance at WrestleMania this year, cheering on your wife, Chelsea Green.
Yes.
making her in-ring debut. How was that?
Oh man, super proud of Chelsea Green. She never really got an opportunity the last time around. So when she got the call this time to come back, even though it really ruined my shtick on the indies, I knew that she had to go back. She had to test it out. And I'm so proud of everything that she's been doing since then. From the Royal Rumble to all the backstage segments. Now to have a WrestleMania match, super proud of her. And I know she's just getting started there, but it was great to watch her. I was just beyond proud. I can't even express it.
I'll bet. And of course, your good friend Cody Rhodes was also main eventing against Roman Reigns. What was it like to be in the crowd watching on for his first big main event match?
Yeah, unfortunately he didn't win the match, but I think just being in that match was a win. I've been friends with Cody. It's well documented. We've been close for a while, and he left WWE. He wasn't fired. He left to bet on himself, to elevate himself, to find himself, and that's exactly what he did. And to come back and to main event for the WWE Championship WrestleMania, I mean, he should be incredibly proud of himself.
Incredible, because one of his last matches, if not his last match, was that very same ladder match, wasn't it? That you won the title at WrestleMania 32, where he was Stardust.
And actually his very last match is against me, and I beat him.
Is it? Hey,
so
there you go.
The last two people to beat Cody Rhodes are Roman Reigns and Matt Cardona. So
well, I'm going to WrestleMania 40, so I'm just throwing it out there now.
Sounds you like never know. Match. You never
know. Talk me through the last 3 years then. So you let go, you have this period, you have this 90 days in the sun, enjoying your pool, enjoying Orlando. But then what? How do you start to rebuild from scratch at a time when there is no wrestling?
I believe it's that July when the 90 days runs up. A lot of the guys I was released with all went to Impact Wrestling. Brian Myers, Heath, Gallows, Anderson, EC3, Eric Young, they all went to Impact. So I was like, well, I can't just be another guy at Impact. Impact would reach out if I wanted to go. Of course, I was very appreciative of the opportunity, but I just couldn't be another guy. They're all going at the same time. I didn't want to do that. So I chose to try AEW. And I think it's well documented that it just didn't work out. I was there like 3 or 4 shows. Great time there. Just I was never offered anything. I waited around for an offer, never came. So I said, all right, well, it is what it is. I got to just hit the ground running, right? I had reached back out to Impact. And at the time they said, sorry, we have nothing for you. And I couldn't blame them. They had been reaching out to me and I kept saying, no, I got this AEW deal. So I thought that I'd kind of screwed myself over, right? There was nothing, I don't blame Impact. They're not just going to take me when I want to go. They have nothing for me. AEW didn't work out, but the indie world still hadn't quite opened up yet. There were a couple shows with the social distancing and the mask and everything like that. I'm like, oh, I don't really want this to be like my return to wrestling, just in front of like 50 people scattered wearing masks. So I avoided the indies for a while. And then, we talk about being always ready. I think someone got injured or someone couldn't make one of the Impact pay-per-views. And I got a call like, hey, can you be at the pay-per-view tomorrow? And luckily, I was in shape. I was tan. Said, yeah, I'll be there. I went there, knocked it out of the park, and I stayed with Impact for another 2 years on just a handshake deal. I appreciate Impact for giving me that opportunity. And it definitely helped rebuild my confidence and helped me figure out who Matt Cardona was, because I was able to, have matches and have backstage interviews or backstage segments to try to figure out, all right, who is Matt Cardona? It's more than just Zack Ryder with his real name, but I didn't know exactly who I was. And it still took some time. And it wasn't until that summer where the indies started opening back up and where I was presented with an opportunity to have a death match against Nick Gage in Game Changer Wrestling. That's where everything changed in a good way, changed my career, changed my life. And that's all because I took a chance and took this opportunity to wrestle Nick Gage in a death match. And for those who don't know, a death match, it's as violent as it sounds. There's blood, there's guts, there's barbed wire, there's glass, there's pizza cutters, there's light tubes, there's chairs, there's weapons. And I wrestled the king of the death match, Nick Gage. I knew it would create buzz. I could not anticipate how much buzz that it would create, and it changed everything for me.
And so from there, you've become, well, the indie god, the belt collector. How many belts are you up to now?
Well, right now I got 7. But yeah, it was after that match where, that particular show, at the end of the day, really, it's an independent wrestling show in Atlantic City, New Jersey. But because of the internet and social media and how wrestling shows stream now on things like Fight TV or Premier Streaming Network, it was trending #1 over the UFC and the Olympics, which is pretty nuts. People just wanted to see me get my ass kicked, but I won. And then it just changed everything for me, where I'd go to these independent shows or even impact shows, and maybe like 25% of the crowd would boo me, and then like a couple weeks later, like 50%. The more and more I kept doing these GCW shows, then 50% turned to 75%, and then it's like 100%. No matter where I go, middle fingers in my face from the fans, people hating me, throwing stuff at me, and I absolutely loved it. That was the change I needed. You can't just like change your character on the indies. It doesn't quite work. There needs to be like a catalyst. There needs to be a spark. And that death match was certainly the spark. And since then, I've just rode that momentum to the next big moment and sunk in that moment and appreciate that moment. But I didn't live in the past of that moment. I'm always looking for the next, chasing the dragon, chasing the buzz, chasing that next moment, which has led to, becoming the indie god, the belt collector. So, I don't have this grand plan. I don't know what's next, but to use the term again, I'm always ready for whatever opportunity comes my way. And listen, I'm going to fail. I'm going to fall flat on my face. And I have a number of times the past 3 years, certainly have in my 20-year career. But that's how you learn. That's how you grow, right?
Absolutely. How much funner is it to be a bad guy versus being a good guy in wrestling?
Oh man, I mean, these past 3 years, talk about fun. I mean, it's been the most fun these past 3 years I've ever had in my career, and also like success, right? Like, what is success? I don't know. How do you define success? Do you define it by like accolades? Do you define it by happiness? Do you define it by money? I don't know, but however you define it, like, this has been the most successful I've ever been in my career. So I don't care how you want to define it, whether it be by money, happiness, success.
How do you define it, Matt? What's success look like to you?
I think it's a combo of all three. I think happiness is the most important part. Yeah. I think if you're making all this money but you're miserable, what's the point, right? Yeah. I think happiness should be how you define success, but everything's opinions, right? So if you're going by happiness, then I'm certainly the most successful I've ever been. But if you want to throw in accolades, if you want to throw in money, if you want to attach that to success, then fuck it. I'm the most successful I've ever been in these past 3 years. And that's because I'm working my ass off. I'm doing this all myself. Of course, the supports from the fans is necessary, but like, I got nobody backing me. It's just me. It's just me doing all this.
Yeah, and that must make it so much more satisfying as well, that that you've built this, that this is self-made.
Yeah, I mean, it's satisfying. It's also stressful because the pressure's on. It's a good pressure, right? But it's a pressure to keep this alive, to keep this going. Like I said, like, okay, it's now been 3 years since I've been released. How do I keep this buzz up? And it's incredibly challenging, and but it's a good challenge. It's a challenge I'm willing to take on head on. I'd be lying if I said to you, oh, I never want to go to AEW or WWE ever again. No, that'd be a lie. Of course, I would love to, walk into a Walmart or Target and see my action figure on the shelf. I would love to wrestle at WrestleMania or Madison Square Garden. But right now, like, I'm having the time of my life, and I'm not doing what I'm doing, asking the question, ooh, how can I get back to WWE? How can I get back to AEW? Like, I don't have a chip on my shoulder. I'm not trying to prove anybody wrong. I'm trying to prove myself right, my fans right, my supporters right. And hey, if I gain some fans along the way, glad to have you. But this isn't about proving people wrong and getting them to jump on the bandwagon. If it happens, cool, but it's not about you guys. It's just not.
You think AEW was just a case of kind of wrong place, wrong time?
Yeah, I think so. Wrong place, wrong time. And also, like, I didn't know who I was, right? Like, I at that time, what am I? I'm Zack Ryder without the Zack Ryder name. Like, what is that? And if I didn't know, then AEW certainly didn't know. So at the time, I was bummed out. It didn't happen. Looking back, blessing in disguise. Thank God I didn't get signed there, because I would have never, or probably never, become the deathmatch king. I'd probably never, which means I wouldn't become the indie guy, which means I'd probably just be sitting on like Dark or Elevation. And I've said this before, like, no offense to those guys, that's fine. That's not what I want. Been there, done that in WWE. Like, I don't want to just be another guy on the roster. That's fine. And I'm so glad there's people out there because of AEW who have a steady paycheck and who have a place to work and a place to show their skills. And that's awesome. But at this point in my career, this point in my life, I don't want to just be another guy on the show. Been there, done that. I know I can be more. And I've proven that over the past 3 years.
Going back to your early days in WWE, how would you describe the Zack Ryder character? Like, how was it pitched to you at the beginning?
Well, that's a loaded question. So at first, Brian Myers and we debut in WWE as the Major Brothers. We were twins, Brian and Brett Major. And our original idea that we were kind of doing in developmental was that we'd be like these 80s early 90s over the top baby faces to the point that like it would be annoying, to the point that you would boo us, right? But they brought us in as baby faces. So it didn't work because people thought we were annoying. People didn't like us, but we weren't heels, you know? So it just wasn't working. And we knew that right away. We knew it wasn't working. And we had the idea. Edge was just coming back from an injury. There was a show that was very popular on TV called Entourage, and we wanted to be Edge's entourage, like the little minions for Edge. And we kind of looked like Edge. And we had this idea that we would be dressed as imposter Edges and kind of fake out Batista and Undertaker and help Edge win the world title. And luckily, the writers liked the idea. Luckily, Edge liked the idea. And he took us under his wing. We went from doing, sitting and catering at SmackDown to wrestling Batista, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair. So what a great learning experience. Got to run in the main event of WrestleMania 23. My first involvement in a WrestleMania is running in on the main event. So, and then I thought, oh, well, next year it'll be Edge versus Kurt Hawkins versus Zack Ryder in like an Edge Heads Explodes match. But Edge got injured. Edge Heads did nothing. We were just Edge's guys. We're guys that look like Edge, but we weren't with Edge, right? Like, I don't even think people in the company knew which one was Zack, which one was Kurt. We were just two guys who looked like Edge. I wore long tights, he wore trunks, and it was going nowhere fast. So we had this idea to kind of show different sides of ourselves, where I'd be the over the top, doing like the woo 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 and all that BS, and Brian would be like the straight face, like, oh God, this fucking guy. But like at least we'd have different personalities. And then there was a draft that year, and we got split up, which it had to be done. Like the tag team was dead. It was dead. And I already had this idea, like I want to be like this douchebag from Long Island. I want to cut my hair, have the spiky hair, the sunglasses indoors, pop the collar. This was all stuff that was going on Long Island in New York, where I was going out with my friends. Like I was like, that guy at the club, I fucking hate him, but I could be that guy and make the audience hate me, So that was my pitch, and they went with it. I wore like one-legged tights just because I wanted to stand out. I knew that if someone was watching wrestling, they might not know my name, but they would know, oh, that's the guy who does the woo woo woo, or wears the one-legged tights, or wears the sunglasses all the time. So I knew I had to be different to create a distinction between myself and Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins and Edge. I had to be different from that Edge head look, and it worked out. It was a totally different thing that the audience saw from me, and I mean, that was just one step in changing my career.
Yeah, my wife knows you as the woo woo guy.
Oh, see, so there you go.
There you go. And the radio guy as well. She likes that song.
Yeah.
But look, there's another really big similarity between us in that our mutual love of wrestling action figures. So I adored my figures as a kid, but then I got a bit older, and they went up into the attic and they gathered cobwebs, and I forgot about them until about 10 years ago. And I refound them when I was moving house, and my just love for them was rekindled. And when I'm talking about the figures, I'm talking about early 90s WWF Hasbro's, the sweet spot. For me, it's a hobby, but for you, you have really doubled down on this. You've got the Major Wrestling Figure podcast, and you're now even producing and selling your own Major Bendy's figures worldwide.
Yes.
What lies behind your love for wrestling figures, Matt?
Yeah, as a kid, of course, I played with them. I collected them, and I never quite grew out of them. I don't know why. I just love it. And it's not just wrestling figures. I collect Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Ninja Turtles. But I had this idea in 2018, probably a little before that, to start a podcast with Brian Myers. Like, we're talking about wrestling figures every day, texting about it. Like, why don't we, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's 45 minutes, whatever. Let's do podcasts about it. And it really took a lot of convincing to get him to do it. I finally did. And it just took off, right? Where now like the shows are like, it went from a 45-minute show to like 2 hours every week. We have bonus episodes. We have live podcasts. We have our own toy line. We have our own wrestling promotion. We have our own YouTube channel, our own like subscription service. It's pretty nuts what it has become. But, I think any wrestling fan who was a kid at one point had some sort of figure, whether it be the LJNs or the Hasbros or the Jacks, no matter when they grew up. And we can't go back in time. Like, Back to the Future is not real. We can't get in a DeLorean and go back in time. But through these wrestling figures, through, whether you're going to a toy store or you're going on eBay, you can relive or recreate childhood memories. I say this all the time. Like if you got the Ultimate Warrior Hasbro for your birthday and you love that birthday, you can fucking go on eBay right now, buy that figure brand new.
Yeah.
You can open it up brand new, like it's 1991. Or, for me, Christmas 1995, I did not get the Hasbro 1, 2, 3 kid figure, but now thanks to eBay, I have a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I could create moments that didn't really happen. So I think starting the podcast, I never fell out of love with pro wrestling, but starting this podcast really helped remind myself why I do love it so much.
Yeah, I mean, this was, for anyone watching on YouTube, this was the sweet spot for me. So I got him recently.
Oh, Giant Gonzalez.
Giant Gonzalez, found him in a vintage toy store, but this is what started it all. You see,
Papa Shango, yeah.
Classic
yeah.
Papa Shango. Is there still one holy grail figure that you're searching for, an itch that you haven't yet scratched as a collector?
I'm very fortunate that I have everything that I want. I have everything that's on my list. Now it's at a point where, like, if I go to a vintage toy store or even if I'm on eBay, I see something that maybe like I didn't really appreciate as a kid, and now I really dig them. For instance, there are these figures called Stomp, where they're like wrestlers like in like army gear, like Stone Cold Steve Austin has like a gun, and then there's like an underwater like version of them. Like at the time, like this is so stupid. But now, like I have them all with all their weapons, all their accessories. There's a Stomp go to space where there's like Mark Marrow in space. Who needs Mark Marrow in space? But I do now as a 37-year-old man. I need him in my collection.
I love it. My friend Carl and I, we love your figure hunting videos that you're doing. When at what point did that begin?
Yeah, so we started this YouTube channel because, like I said, the podcast was just going to be 45 minutes, talk about figures, and it kind of just kept growing organically, where we're like, well, if we're going to these figures stores, why not film it and kind of vlog it? And then those kind of led to us even just vlogging like our weekends, like wrestling. So our fans, they're so invested in us. We call them the major marks. And we're so grateful for them because, like I said earlier, when the pandemic shut the world down, we couldn't wrestle. They were supporting us with that podcast. We were afraid, like, oh man, is anyone going to be buying like collectibles right now or wanting to hear about people buying collectibles? But it turned out almost the whole world was buying collectibles.
Yeah.
Everything, all the value and everything went up. Our podcast exploded. So we thank the fans big time for that.
Yeah, I've got into recollecting Hasbro's at the worst time. Like it's all got really expensive now. Like my holy grail is still like a Minton card, Series 8, Bret Hitman Hart. One day,
it's a tough one. Yeah.
One day he'll be mine, but I'll have to remortgage my house. I just want to kind of circle back quickly to personal journeys and resilience. So something I wanted to ask you about was your earlier life, and I know that you overcame cancer as a teenager. Yeah. Can you talk me through that time in your life, Matt, and kind of how that affected you and the role it played in you becoming a pro wrestler?
Yeah, like honestly, like I get asked about this every once in a while, and the thing is, like I was so like I don't know if you want to call it tunnel vision or what. Like I knew ever since I was a little kid, like I'm gonna be a pro wrestler, and nothing was gonna stop me. So like when I got the cancer, which it was a tumor that was in my foot that spread to my lungs. All the surgeries got them. The chemo got it. Like anything you go through, I went through, and it sucked. It really did. I'm not trying to make it seem like it was a walk in the park because it certainly wasn't. But I knew at the end of all this, like, oh, I'm going to be a wrestler. I have to beat this because I'm going to be a wrestler. So there was no question, no doubt in my mind. It's like, all right, well, this sucks. Like when it's over, all right, it is what it is. Like there's really nothing I could do about it. I just knew I had to beat it. I had to beat it because my dream was to be a wrestler, and well, if I let this kill me, I can't be a wrestler, right? So it was as easy as that to me, which might sound a little crazy, but that's just like the mindset I had at the time is like, all right, well, this is going to be over eventually. And when it is, we're going to get, 100% into pro wrestling. So like even my senior year of high school, 11th grade, I miss because of the cancer. I come back senior year, 12th grade. I wrestle in high school. I think my weight's like 160. Like I'm not impressive. Like my physique is not impressive by any means. People thought I was crazy. My mom included for not wanting to go to college. I think go to college for what? Like to get to do what? To be a teacher? I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be an accountant. And no offense to any of those. My brother's a teacher. Like just not what I want to do. I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I don't want to wear a suit. I don't want to be behind a desk. I don't want to be a nurse. I don't want to be a doctor. Insert job. I don't want to be it. That's it. I want to be a wrestler. That was it. That was the only thing. And I wasn't an overly positive person. Still don't think I am. I think I condition myself and I teach myself, but certainly then I wasn't. But for some reason I knew like, this is what I'm going to do. This is it. I'm going to be in the WWE, not just be a pro wrestler. I'm going to be in the WWE. So I graduated high school 2003. That September, start college just to make my parents happy. I went to some bullshit, the community college. I don't even know what I got an associate's degree in something. I don't know, whatever. I don't even know what it was. That's how meaningless it was. Yeah, but the whole time I'm drawing up like wrestling logos or cutting class to go to Toys R Us and look for figures. It was a joke, right? It was just so my parents would pay for my wrestling school. And even in wrestling school, like I was one of the guys who took it super seriously. And I just went back to my home wrestling promotion to do a show. And there were still guys in the locker room who were there before me. And listen, I get it. Not everyone is going to make it to WWE. Not everyone's going to make, and some people treat this like they're playing softball. That's fine. It's a hobby. The weekend warrior. That's fine. To me, it was not that. To me, I'm getting to WWE as quick as fucking possible. And I'm going to, be as successful as possible. And luckily, Brian Myers, I met him at wrestling school and we had the same exact mindset. Yeah, at first we didn't like each other. At first we were competition because neither of us grew up, I want to be in a tag team. No, I don't think anyone grows up and it's like, I want to be the next LOD. No, you want to be the next Austin or Rock or, you know what I'm saying? Once we both found out we were both 18-year-old kids secretly collecting figures, we both were obsessed with wrestling, and that kind of broke the ice, and we started teaming together, and like the rest is history. We were signed 2006. I was 20 years old. It was pretty wild.
Do you think you were ready when you got signed?
Absolutely not. But what are you going to do? Turn it down?
No.
No, of course not. The tryout I had, WWE tryout, had it alongside Brian Myers. After the tryout, I'm like, fuck, that was horrible. But even though it sucked, I'm only 20. I'll get another one eventually. It was a good experience. The fact that I got a call saying you're signed to WWE, you got to move from New York to Georgia, I was like, holy shit, like I wasn't ready for it. You're not going to turn it down, right? And even like my first couple years on WWE television, I cringed going back and watching that stuff because I was learning on live television where a lot of these guys, they're learning on the independents in front of, a couple hundred people, maybe a couple dozens of people at these shows that no one will ever see. They're learning, they're making mistakes no one will ever see. And I'm making these mistakes on live TV. And that is what it is. That's just part of my story, part of my journey.
Yeah, it's an incredible journey. And what's next? I mean, you said you're always ready. I know it's hard to predict where you want to go from here, but are there any kind of dreams that you haven't yet achieved personally or professionally that you want to tick off your Matt Cardona bucket list?
I mean, obviously being WWE champion is definitely number one. I mean, I think if you got into this business and that's not your ultimate goal, I think you're lying to yourself. Who's to say if it should be your goal or not? But to me, it always was. Why get into something to not be the best, right? And listen, if it doesn't happen, if my career ended today, this second, I would be satisfied and proud of what I accomplished, but I want more. And I don't think there's anything wrong with achieving and reaching a goal and then wanting more and to achieve more. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Definitely got to look back, give yourself a pat in the back, be grateful for the opportunities you got and what you've accomplished, but you gotta keep wanting more. You gotta keep setting goals. That's how you grow, I think.
And just kind of circling back to finish up in terms of both the journeys that you and I have been on, have you got any advice for anyone if they lost their job or are dealt a bad card in life in terms of how to turn that around into a positive?
Yeah, I think it's all mindset. Like we talked about earlier, it's like you got to figure out how you define success, right? Like find something that makes you happy. Maybe you got fired from your job and maybe it was a blessing in disguise where you can find something else that you're passionate about and find a way to make money doing that. Because I promise you're going to work harder at something you're passionate about. You're going to work harder doing something for you or doing something you love than you would at like a 9 to 5 or something that you're just clocking in and clocking out. So I think that would be my piece of advice is to, we only have one life, right? Why spend it doing something you don't love? I mean, to me, it sounds like so ridiculous. But for so many people, they don't do what they love. They don't do what they're passionate about. I don't know why I'm wired the way I am, where like I just knew I had this goal, this passion, this dream that I had to go for it. I almost feel sorry for the people who are afraid to bet on themselves. I don't want to look back on my life and have any regrets. So, I mean, I hope that it's never too late, right? To change your own story. It's never too late. I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, like you could always tomorrow you could start doing what you want to do. You could be your own boss. It's going to take work. I think a lot of work. It might not be easy. You might fail a bunch of times and you might never achieve your goal, but wouldn't you want to try? That's how I look at it.
Absolutely. Well, I think your journey's been absolutely inspiring. I've loved talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time, Matt, and for your honesty. And just wish you nothing but the best and every success as your journey continues.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a wild ride. I don't know what's coming next, but I'm going to plug my catchphrase. I'm always ready.
Always ready. Always ready. I love it. Yeah. Well, look, thanks to everyone for being part of the Good Journeys for Second Mountain podcast today. You can find all of our past inspiring conversations over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music, and see the lovely faces of my guests like Matt over on our YouTube channel. Just search for #GoodJourneysPod. So that's it for today. He's been Matt Cardona. I've been Ben Veal. This has been the Good Journeys Pod. So until next time, let's keep climbing together, and I'll see you all again soon.